Hey, what up, y'all? So, trying to get back in the habit of doing more of these or whatever. So, I saw this tweet this morning. A lot of comments under it, some appropriate, some not, whatever that means. This question comes up a lot. It comes up not just for autism, but also for other neurodivergent conditions like ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, Tourette's, a bunch of other things, right? And there's a few things here. One, this is a valid question. Some of y'all are slamming this person in the comments. Sometimes when people ask this question, they deserve to be slammed because they follow up with a bunch of, or they double down and triple down and quadruple down with a bunch of very hateful pieces of rhetoric that they take as fact. If you're asking a question, you're usually trying to understand something, so you probably shouldn't assume that your answer to the question is fact. I mean, that's contradictory. But anyway, outside of that, this is a great question. The reason why is because it has changed a lot and people don't know why. Awareness is still growing. Instead of shaming folks, let's educate them, right? So I'm not a scripture and verse person, so I'm not going to be able to say exact years and authors of studies, but maybe like 6 years ago, 10 years ago, the diagnosis rate for autism in the US was about 159 kids. So like for every 159 kids, one kid was autistic, right? I think recently it went down to like 1 in 50, right? That's a huge like change, right? So what drives that? Well, when you have a bunch of misinformation, bunch of disinformation out here on social media and different places, people get these wrong narratives. Oh, it's the toxins. Oh, it's TV and social media. Oh, it's because of all these drugs people are taking. Oh, it's because people are just willy-nilly throwing diagnoses out there. In my community, the research community, the mental health clinician community, we also debate this question. It's a good question. Here's my perspective on it. We have a lot more awareness and acceptance of what autism is at this point. We still don't really fully know what it is, too. Let me add that the very first person to ever get diagnosed as autistic died this year. He was in his 80s. So what that tells you is that this is not a very old understanding of a condition, right? Also, that person was diagnosed with Asperger's. And pretty much people who weren't white, upper middle class men didn't get diagnosed with Asperger's. I have what is formerly known as Asperger's. I'm autistic. I have just been realizing this over the past 1 or 2 years, which is part of my whole narrative as well. So we don't know a lot about this. It has changed. The way that we make a diagnosis is a very subjective process. It's based on the DSM-5, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual for Mental Health Disorders, right? When we diagnose someone, we're looking at a set of criteria. There's no like biopsy or blood test, right? We're saying, do they do these things? And how often and how long do they do these things? Is it, I'm running out of breath, y'all. I should have ate all that breakfast and started walking and talking. So do they do all these things that are in the criteria? Well, where do we get that criteria from? That criteria comes from the people who do the studies. The people who do the studies are typically white men because that's who had access to that space, right? We have been removing barriers. That is what social justice and DEI work is about, removing barriers so that we can have more access, so that people can have more acceptance, right? So when they're building those studies to figure out the criteria for the diagnosis of these conditions, they have to come up with questions. They have to test those questions. Then they have to normalize those questions to figure out if they're accurate, to figure out if they're really assessing for what they wanted to assess for. So that means you have to get a group of people, a group of participants. Those are called, that's called your sample. That is the group of people in the study. This isn't hard, y'all. If the group of people in the study that this is being normed on to diagnose folks is only upper middle class white men. Who do you think those diagnoses are going to help? Who do you think those diagnoses are going to fit for? Who do you think those diagnoses are not going to help and fit for? Right. So for me, very clinical term here, I am super ADHD, right? And I actually have a more female presentation of ADHD. So this is one of the reasons why I was never diagnosed as a kid. I'm also realizing I'm autistic, formerly known as Asperger's. So previously we didn't think that ADHD and autism could exist together, right? So my presentation was even more nuanced in comparison to these studies. This is why we're seeing that more people like me are getting in the field, spreading awareness through videos like this, working with their local community, working on research and studies, helping to get people diagnosed. That is why the rates are going up, y'all. And I will live on that hill every day. Keep walking.